So we're going to cut out this chair. I don't want to use a mat knife for this fine kind of cutting. It might appear that it'd be easiest just to cut the chair out and then start working on the inside pieces. Completely backwards. You need the stability of the full piece of paper to help you get the small cuts, the intricate cuts out. I'm going to make this a little more complicated by saying that there is some actual shaping in this back that's cut away in the wood. So I'm going to want to cut those kind of pieces first. And what I'm going to do is, again, I'm not cutting towards myself, but as much as possible, if you'd like to, it's best to keep turning the paper as you're cutting to get a good angle. And I'm just scoring again right now and just kind of walking around this. There isn't a ruler probably made that's going to give me exactly what I want, but I should be pulling towards myself as much as possible. And then I'm going to cut. When I want to have a nice clean corner, I'm best to start in the corner and cut away from it. That way. And again, cut towards yourself. I'm going to do the same thing on this part of the railing. And you'll note, wait, how come you're not using a metal ruler? Well, it's best if you've got a straight edge to do that. The problem being with the ruler is that it covers up a lot of your drawing, so you can't see all your detail. And eventually you'll get to the point where you're pretty good at just pulling yourself. And I'm cutting into that nice edge over there. Whoops, that got off the line a little bit. And this is where I'm going to get into trouble, because if I pull too hard, I'll cut the side of the chair off. I'm better off to stop and then cut from that into my other line. Then I'll get nice clean edges in those cuts. Make sense? Okay. I'm going to now go back and make sure those are nice and clean and fully cut. Feels like they work pretty well. When I'm working with a mat board, I tend to push a little bit harder just because of the experience I've had. I'm cutting into this surface that really pulls my knife well. If I were cutting into a piece of wood, it's harder to cut this because there isn't a sponge bottom that helps pull the blade through. Now you can kind of see my cuts from the other side, and I can see which ones haven't come all the way through. Some of that molding has not come through yet. So I'm going to work with that. Work on the scroll work just a little bit more, and you'll notice the paper starts peeling up away from my blade, which might suggest to me the direction I want to cut. And I'm best, if I have an edge that is going to be a clean cut, to cross over it with the blade both directions. So this comes out and this one comes across. Now I should have a nice clean lift from that cut. Does that make sense? Then I'm going to cut this nice curve on both sides towards myself, cutting into the little edges again. And then I'm going to lift that piece out. So there's the cutaway piece. And now I have the cutaway of the top of my chair right there. Hope you can see that. Okay. I'm going to then cut the bottom shape. And again, cut into each of those corners. Get them nice and clean. Oh, and the piece just fell away. One edge got caught because it's not completely clean. So let me pull over here and clean that corner really well. And then it should come apart. So now I've got the full back of the chair detail done. I would need now to do the inset of the chair legs the same way. Pull across those. I tend to do all the lines going the same direction at the same time because I'm already pulling that direction. It just makes sense to me to pull all of them. Did I get this one? I did not. So I'm going to pull this one too. Then I turn the board around, cut cleanly into those corners. And I can check the back just to make sure it looks like it's fairly well cut. They're pulling apart well. Then I can turn this direction and get the shape of the molding. Clean those corners really well, make sure it pops, and I can usually just pick it up with the knife and pull it out. So there's part of that leg done. Okay, and then I'll do the bottom turning on that one and leave that for the next. Come back over here, do a clean cut of this one. This is a nice clean blade. It's cutting very well. I'm not pushing very hard and I'm still getting a good lift, but look at my corners that are still caught. So let me clean the corners. A nice clean cut so it'll pull out. Come on, paper, cooperate. There we go. And I can lift that one out. Whoops, that one corner's still been a little stubborn. Got it. It's gone. So now I've got my legs pretty well done. I do need to get the inside of this bottom part of this one. Now, particularly when I'm doing something on the edge, I don't want it to rip my paper, so I'm better off yet to really not push hard, to score that and cut it in multiple cuts, and then pull it away from the picture. So now you get an idea of the end of that leg. My next piece now will be to cut out the shaping of these legs. So I'm going to start here, pulling again towards me. Now I've learned that it's smart to lay a ruler and press down on that delicate piece that could rip, so it's got some support while I cut out the rest of the shape. I'm going to do it in a couple of cuts just to make sure it works. I'm right-handed, so I need to do the other one the other direction. And particularly when I'm cutting from an edge into a detail, it's going to want to bend and mash on itself. So I'm best to lay, again, I'm laying that ruler not completely on the leg, but about halfway across it, and then pressing down. Let's see if I can get around here and you can see that just a little better. Okay. So I am free-handing it. There's that side of the leg and that side of the leg. So now my chair actually has these legs cut out ready to go. I'm going to finish this piece over here just because it's vulnerable. Now, I put tabs on this side, but I didn't put tabs on this side. Really would be smart to add my tabs. And let me show you this up close so you can really get an idea of what those tabs look like. I've added little tabs on the ends of the front, on the two sides of the chair that will grab this part. Now, technically I don't need these tabs because there's nothing to fold down on the back side of this chair. We're not going to ever see it. I am going to cut a tab because I may decide later on I want to just cut a little rectangular piece and glue on the back so I finish off the back side of that chair if it's going to show on stage. So I am going to still tab them. So I've cut to the top of my legs, and unfortunately I already cut to the top of this one before I made the tab, so now I can't put a tab on it. Darn. I could glue one back on if I wanted to. I'm not going to worry about it just for our example. But I'm going to cut my tabs. Here's my tab here, here's my tab here, and I usually cut the point off of the tabs. And I'm just going to cut all my tabs just so I know they're all ready to go. I'm being dangerous and cutting into my chair over here, which is not a smart thing to do, but it will work. I don't want to take forever making this chair for you. Let's cut this leg out over on this side. I'm going to lay my ruler on here. Cut along the molding on this side, get the shape that I want. using my ruler to support it. Sometimes I've used my finger. Good way to cut off the fingertips, so I don't advise it. I'm going to leave it attached to the paper because that will only help reinforce it. And I'm going to be risky and try to do this left-handed. Whoa, let's see what happens. Whoa, feels really strange. For you left-handeders, this would be the way you'd want to be doing it, right? Now I've got those two sides cut. All I needed is to cut off the bottom of the chair legs. And this whole leg now should, in theory, pop up. There it is. You can see the legs cut on that part of the chair. And I'm not getting a pull away there, which means this corner is not clean. So I've just cleaned that one up. Now, let me do the top of the chair. Here's this little detail of the board along the top. I can just cut fairly easily away. And hopefully this won't buckle. If it feels like it might want to buckle, then I'm going to lay the ruler on it to hold it in place. Stopping away from the corner, coming back and cleaning that one correctly. There's that top cut now. And I'll do a very quick finish of this just to get us past this project. You'll notice that I'm using the ruler now on the other side, just anything to help support the paper. Okay, I think I now have the chair about ready to pop out of this board. All I have is this one tab area that I made a mistake on that I'm going to just cut into and get rid of. It's gone. You can see the chair is pretty much cut. All I have to do now is cut the front. And pull it all the way across. And now I have a complete chair that's been lifted out. There's what it's been cut away from, and I'm going to save this paper for another project. However, it's not completely done. I need to score so things will fold. This part of the chair is going to fold down. So I'm going to use the edge of my ruler right on that line again, and I'm going to do my first cut that scores it, right? We already know that's all it does is score. And I'm going to score the front edge as well and the two tabs at the same time. So I went all the way across that. And then I'll do the other side of the chair right here and score that. I've got a little piece that's not quite coming off by the tab. So I'm going to clean that corner just a little bit and pull that piece out. Okay. So that's what it looks like now, and I've got everything scored. The only other thing is I need to be able to fold this up, which means the score has to be on the bottom side. It folds away from the score. So I'll flip this over and simply score lightly because these are two fairly thin pieces of the chair. That will allow those to flip up in just a minute. But right now I'm going to flip down the two sides, as you'll see. I'll flip in the tabs. They're ready to go. Can you see that? And then I'll fold down the front of the chair. All those scores allow it to fold fairly freely. So that will be, I want it to fold past where it's going to be and then come back to its finished place. Oh, I've got a little tab on the back that I didn't ever score. I'm just going to cut it off because the other one got cut off anyway, right? Okay. Now it's time to talk about gluing. Let me talk to you a little bit about your glue and maintaining your glue. Notice as glue dries, it'll start having hard edges around things. So as I pull the top of this up, I'll notice that there's dry glue inside a lot of this. I'll often just take this into a sink and run water on it and help pull off a lot of that extra glue because I need a nice clean stream of glue coming. It's fairly well cleaned out, but I could use my little pen knife here and help clean out some of the extra glue that's on there. chip off a lot of that glue, just get it out of there. We don't need it anymore. It will just glump up everything that we're trying to do. So I'm just going to clean it. Be very careful when you're using a knife to clean things, because you might just pop off the top of the blade, break it off, and then you've got this little tiny piece of metal that could be very dangerous. You could get it on you, you could get it on someone else. Okay, that's been pretty well cleaned out. I want to then make sure and look down the funnel, and it looks pretty cleared out there. I can pop this back on. I want to have a good sound so I know that glue is going to be coming through. Okay, that's going to roll, so I'm going to set it over on its side, out of the way. Please note that I'm starting to get lots of stuff on my board. So before I go any further and start getting glue out here that'll start mucking it all up, I'm going to use my brush and clean my tray, my table off. Get all these extra pieces into my hand and into the garbage, out of the way. Good. Okay, we are now ready to glue. Do not glue on a mat. Not a good choice. Instead, pull out a good, just scrap piece of paper and lay it down. And there are two different ways of approaching gluing. I'm going to want to get the glue down in the bottle, first of all, so it's ready to drip out like that is. And so if I'm really good, I can carefully just touch it where I want it to be. Or better yet, often I'll use a little piece of one of my pieces of wood, and I'll use it and collect the glue off the paper and apply it to the area where I want it. I have more control over that than glue coming out of a bottle. Make sense? I'm now going to fold this over, push the tabs down with my glue stick, because I don't want to touch them with my finger. And then I'm going to fold the paper into the glue and hold it there for just a moment. Now, I frequently will use my knife to just actually push those tabs against the inside of the paper on both sides, because I got a nice straight edge here to help push that. I'm using the side of my blade, please note, because I don't want to snap it off again. And I'm trying to get a good 90-degree angle on these folds so this chair will actually stand up. And you'll notice that the top is already doing its thing because it's very thin. And I'm going to then, once it's folded up, I'm going to put a little bit of glue along that edge to fill in the score that I made. And therefore, when that dries, it'll help strengthen that vertical edge. And now I have a chair that I have cut out of paper, folded and glued, and it's not staying as well right there. But you'll notice that that glue grabbed fairly quickly. I would be smart for the back of my chair to actually sit this against something and let it all dry now. Give it a good 2, 3 to 5 minutes, and we'll have a nice chair all cut out for us, ready to be used on our set. I would probably finish this one off by creating a spanner for the bottom of the chair that would actually hold these two parts of it out. So let's say I knew what that looked like and I'd already drawn it. And I'm lying to you because I'm just doing this quickly. And I'm putting 2 little tabs on the end of it. You can't see that very well probably, but it's exactly what I want. It's got some shaping to it, so it looks like a little bit of detail to the chair. Yes, I just cut that on my piece of paper, but fortunately it was over the top of my mat. I'm going to score the edges of it very carefully. And at this point, I now have my fold over ready to be spanning in between those 2 parts of the chair. And this is the point where I would introduce you to another tool. You're going to need some tweezers. It's pretty hard for your fingers to get in there and do everything you need to do. So I'm going to grab this piece with my tweezer and grab it on the edge so I can actually hold it. Use a little bit of glue on both sides. I'm going to wipe it off just a little bit. I don't need a whole lot of glue. I'm going to place that inside. It wants to keep jumping around. Inside the two sides of the leg. You see that it grabs fairly quickly. And that'll help hold the bottom of the legs together. I just made this very quickly, so it's a little short, but you get the main idea of what's going on there. And this is still weak, so I'm going to come back with a little bit of glue and really hit these back corner edges just a little bit more to give it some strength. That will finish off my chair. It has its spreader on the bottom. The top will lean against the bottle to get it dry, and I'll let the whole thing dry completely now. So hopefully that gives you some ideas on how to make furniture, first of all, but also how to cut out, which of the tools to use at what time for delicate cuts, for large cuts. The last thing I want to emphasize is when I do larger pieces. So let's say I have actually drawn an entire wall unit. Let me just do one very quickly for you. So I've got a complete wall unit. And you always draw anything that you're going to cut out within the paper, and you'll see why in just about 3 seconds. So let's say that is my full wall height there. And I've got a door that's built into this wall. So here is my doorway. And I am doing all this without angles, without just miracle of miracles, right? This has got a nice door frame around it. So we know that it's a door. I think we'll figure that out anyway. It's got some interior design to the door. I find it hard to do this without giving some sort of detail to what's going on here. Again, all this would be done carefully, exactly, using your measurements to get it exactly right, the way it should be. And now that I've got my door drawn, I would then make sure it has its full detail, which usually means that this molding should have some real dimension to it. Now, controversial. Should I do all the detail in the white model fully dimensionally? Probably not. You don't need to. You will in the finished model because it'll let the shop know what parts of this are going to be painted to look like they're dimensional and what parts are going to be physically made dimensional. So there's my door and there's my wall. When I get this built, this wall is going to be flexible like this. So I will go around all the edges and add a tab. Extra thickness to the outside of the wall. And if I were smart, I would do it on the bottom, just the same. Because anywhere I put it, it only helps reinforce the flat piece. Okay, about that much. Then I'll just cut diagonals, or draw diagonals, because they'll be cut in a minute. Across the edges, you'll see why, because it'll all fold down beautifully. So there's the 4 corners. And I'm going to do the exact same thing at the door. Because the door doesn't need a flap, does it? So here's my wall unit completely drawn out, ready to be cut. And I have the tabs all the way around it. Now, what would I cut first? Internal detail, correct? Using a smaller blade, cutting towards myself, I'm going to cut the door in multiple cuts. It's going to open this direction. I'm going to make sure this corner is clean, but it feels like a fairly good cut. And I'm going to cut my tab away on both sides, just so you get the idea. And I'll even cut the bottom of the door off. I want to cut towards myself, so I'm going to move physically over to here. Okay. I'm going to make this door open back into the set, so I'm going to score it carefully right along that fold edge. So now I actually physically have a door that opens and closes. So it opens forward and backwards. Okay. Eventually, of course, that paper will weaken and that'll fall off, but not in the life of this model. We're not too worried about it. What I could do is I could physically cut this whole thing off, then turn it over and lay a piece of tape over this back side. And the tape will become the hinge for the door. That works just as well. I wouldn't do that if it opens this direction, because I don't think I want to see tape out in front. But if I used a nice matte clear tape, I'd be okay as well. Let me quickly then just cut, and these are longer cuts, so I'm going to use my matte knife. And I'm going to finish cutting, and cut along the bottom edge first. Cut those off. I'm already this direction, so I'm going to cut the top as well. And then I'll cut the sides. If I'd planned ahead, I could have just put this right along the edge of my paper and I wouldn't have to worry about a cut here, right? I could have just planned for this 1/4 inch or whatever you want to add for your tabs. It's kind of your choice of how much you want to add. Then I'm just going to cut off the diagonals. And you'll see how this whole thing's going to work in just a moment. I'm now out of the paper. Cut this diagonal, that'll fall off. Cut this one, and that will fall off. So there's my wall cut out. I'm going to now score the flip over edge lines where the real end of the wall is. I'm just scoring it again, not cutting them off. And did I do this edge? I can never remember for sure. Run a fingernail along it, you'll know very quickly. So now I can use a ruler to fold this up and over all the way around. Get a nice clean folded edge. The ruler just helps to keep that line straight, nice and clean. So the wall stays flat beneath it. And now my tabs are laid over. I'm going to now turn them all the way down and use the edge of my knife to totally flatten that against the back of the flat. Now you're going to suddenly realize why we had diagonal cuts. Because as I flap these over, they'll lay nice sandwiched next to each other. And in fact, if they're not quite nice, you'll have to cut them off just a little bit more so they're nice and flat. Fold it always open to get the other one. Fold it down flat again. Then I'm going to take my glue and lay it right in the corner of the fold on all these pieces. All the way around the wall. And now I'm not planning on using this glue for a while, so I'm going to wipe off its tip and close it. This glue dries very quickly, and then wipe it off one more time. You get a nice clean edge at the top. Put that one away. I could just push this over with my fingers and be done with it now. But I'd be smarter to actually press down with a Kleenex, because 9 times out of 10, some of the glue will come squeezing all the way up and out of that joint and onto your fingers, which you really don't want. Some of this glue is already set, so I should have been quicker in getting it all caught. It'll be trial and error, and you'll figure out how much glue to put in, just exactly how to fold it, just how exactly how to cut those angles on the corners. So now I have a reinforced edge to that flat. It'll stand more firmly. It won't be quite as floppy because it's got a double thickness there all the way around the edge. So there's my flat with a door piece in it. The door will actually open it up and hold it for us, which would be really nice, right? Okay. That should give you an idea of how to construct a wall. If I have multiple walls that all stand together, I'm actually smarter to lay it all out and then just score them and fold them rather than trying to glue all those edges together. But if I do have to glue the edge, save a tab, let it fold over and glue to the back of the other flat that doesn't have a tab, and then it'll make them all one piece. So now I have a door. And I have a chair to put against the wall over here. And I have one part of my set done, ready to be assembled. Okay, one last thing I wanted to mention was about steps. If you're building a staircase, one of the cleanest ways to do that is to mark your tread, which is usually 1 foot. And again, I'm not starting right on the edge. 1, and then whatever your rise is. And then 1, and whatever your rise is. And then 1, and then whatever your rise is. I'm doing my rise as 6 inches because I'm actually on a board that just lets me do that. Okay, so let's just say that that's going to be my step unit. Let me just draw all those lines in. Almost always a tread in theater is 1 foot deep for people to step on. I've left an extra line on the top and the bottom for a tab. Can you see that? So it's tabbed at the top and at the bottom. Okay. Now I'm going to score. I'll score the top flap to fold down, and then the front edge of the first step. Skip the tread, go to the next front step, skip the tread, or the rise, sorry. Go down to the front of the next tread, skip the rise, go to the next one, skip. Okay, that gives me the front of each of the steps and the tab, and I'm going to make sure this last tab is also folded. Now, what I'm going to do on these parts that are going to go the other direction is I'm going to do just a little tiny cut edge. If you can see that very well. I've cut into the, I just notched in, and I'm going to notch the other side as well of the bottoms, because this is going to fold the other direction. Making sure I'm doing the right ones here. Okay, so if I now go to the other side, you'll see a mark. And I can now lay my ruler on those and score between the 2 marks. Score those 2, score those 2, score those, cross, and what is this? Oh, that's the top. Okay. You can't see it, I can certainly feel it, but maybe you can see a little bit there, the ridges that I've cut, scored in at the marks that I transferred from the front side. I'm going to now cut my tab on that side. And I'm just feeling if I scored those. I thought I did, and they did. And the first thing I would want to do is turn those flaps on the top and the bottom in. I would glue them in place. Using my Kleenex again to pull off any extra glue so it's not on my hand. And I've done something bad. I'm gluing on top of my mat board. You don't want glue there. Bad thing to have is glue on your mat. So now I've reinforced the top and bottom steps by folding over a tab. And what I normally would have done is tabbed every one of these steps and folded all that down so I have something to glue to my rise of my steps on the outside. But now I just start folding one direction and then the next. And I have a step. One direction and the next. And I have the second step. One and the next. One down, the other one up, and one down. I'm going to want to usually lay all of those very tightly together and press on them to get a really nice fold. And then as I pull it back out, you'll see that I have steps. If I have tabs to help them, and I could actually just glue this edge onto a rise and do pretty well. What I would normally do is do the rise and glue it sideways right into place, let it stay for just a minute. It would be cut out, obviously, not just something on a piece of paper. And then lay the other one on its side and glue it and lay those on its side there too, and then let the whole thing rest for a while. And then I'd have a nice staircase. The only thing you may want at the very end is once you've got everything built, before you assemble your model, because you want to fully detail all your model, this is a good time now to actually draw things on the wall if you want to, or whatever you need to do. As you're about to assemble it, take a spray fixative and spray over your model, because I have lots of pencil lead that I've actually drawn these pieces with, and it'll seal all of that so that it doesn't smear and get in my hands and therefore smear all over the rest of the model. So it's nice to do a spray fixative on it. Then you're ready to start gluing it. Dotting glue along all the edges, laying them down. I typically start at one end of the set and work towards the other end, normally working upstage to downstage, but you can do it any way you want to. And then I tend to set furniture in at the last minute. Now, one thing I've learned that works well for furniture is to actually dot the bottom of these with hot glue and stick them in place. Hot glue actually pulls away a lot faster than this white glue will. And so if I go, I don't really like the chair there, I can usually peel it off easier, rub off the extra glue on the bottom, and then position it somewhere else. Hot glue works for that. Also, rubber cement will work really well for that. Something that's more movable than this white glue, because it's meant to be permanent. And when I have to pull off the white glue, I'll have a ripped edge on one side or the other of my model. Hopefully this has given you some ideas on approaching your white model. It's an exciting thing to do. It's challenging, maybe a bit scary the first time you do a model, but if you kind of think it through process-wise, get all the pieces done, have them all set out, all laid out flat so you can see them all, get them all cut out, then start folding, maybe your furniture pieces, and eventually you'll get it all assembled. So here are some furniture pieces. You'll probably get an idea of how most of them were made, starting usually with the seat area of most furniture pieces, and then the front and the sides. I wanted to turn this around and let you see all the tabs. See all the tabs on the back side of all these flat pieces to give it reinforcement. But I did do the back hanging pieces out of foam core. Scored the back of the foam core so I could curl it around. So hopefully that gives you some good ideas on making white models, and you're not too afraid to maybe approach your first time. Good luck. Take a little bit of patience. Always assume it's going to take about twice as much time as it does. It's a great thing to do while you're sitting and watching television. It's fun, it can be relaxing and kind of soothing, but the first model is always the tricky one. Enjoy.